I was finishing a late shift at the small neighborhood diner I managed when a woman I had never seen before walked through the door and stopped beside my booth. She looked exhausted, but not helpless. There was something controlled about the way she stood, like she had been holding herself together for hours. She glanced toward the front window, then back at me. "Can you pretend to be my husband tonight?" she asked quietly. I actually laughed because I thought she was joking. "You picked the wrong guy," I said. "I'm terrible at pretending." She almost smiled, but her eye stayed fixed on the window. "I'm serious." Before I could ask why, she pulled out a simple gold wedding band and placed it on the table between us. "I just need someone beside me for a few hours." I looked at the ring, then at her. "Why me?" She hesitated. "Because you look like someone who won't ask for anything in return." That answer bothered me more than the request. I had spent enough years watching people use kindness as an invitation to take advantage. Still, something about her voice made me listen. She told me her name was Claire. She worked at a medical supply company across town and had recently ended an engagement. Her former fiancé, according to her, refused to accept that the relationship was over. Tonight, his family was hosting an anniversary dinner at a private restaurant. Claire had been invited because they believed she was still engaged to him. "I could simply not go," she said. "But if I don't, they'll know something happened." "And pretending I'm your husband fixes that?" I asked. She nodded. "It makes them understand that I moved on." I should have said no. Instead, I asked what she needed from me. "Just sit beside me. Hold my hand if someone asks. Smile when I smile." She swallowed hard. "And if anyone asks how we met, say you came into my life when I needed someone." There was something strangely sad about that sentence. I finally agreed. We drove separately to the restaurant. When I arrived, Claire was waiting outside beneath the entrance lights. She had changed into a dark blue dress, and for the first time, she looked less frightened. She slipped the ring onto my finger, took my arm, and whispered, "Whatever happens, don't leave me alone in there." We walked inside together. The room fell quiet almost immediately. Then Claire froze. Across the room stood a man in a grey suit, staring directly at us. Her fingers tightened around my arm. "That's him," she whispered. But before I could respond, the man smiled and lifted his phone toward us. The man in the grey suit didn't take a picture. At least, that's what I thought at first. He lowered his phone, slipped it into his pocket, and walked toward us with a smile that never reached his eyes. Claire leaned closer to me. "His name is Daniel," she whispered. "Please don't let him separate us." I nodded, even though my heart had started beating faster. Daniel stopped 3 feet away and looked at my hand. His eye settled on the wedding ring. "So this is the husband," he said. Claire lifted her chin. "Yes." Daniel smiled. "Interesting. You never mentioned getting married." "Because you never asked," she replied. His expression changed for half a second. Then he looked at me. "How long have you two been together?" I remembered Claire's instructions. Long enough to know she deserves better than being questioned at the door. Daniel stared at me, clearly surprised. Claire squeezed my arm beneath the table. We were shown to a large dining room where several members of Daniel's family were already seated. Every conversation seemed to stop when we entered. Claire sat beside me instead of across the table, and for the next 20 minutes, I played the role she had asked me to play. I smiled. I answered harmless questions. I kept my hand near hers whenever she looked nervous. But the longer I watched her family, the more I realized something was wrong. They weren't angry that Claire had moved on. They were nervous. Especially Daniel's father. He barely looked at her. During dinner, an older woman named Margaret leaned toward Claire and said, "You should have told us before bringing him here." Claire quietly answered, "I thought you already knew." Margaret's face went pale. Then she looked at me and asked, "Does he know what happened?" Claire immediately interrupted. Not tonight. That was the first moment I knew Claire had lied to me. She had never told me what had happened. A few minutes later, she excused herself and went toward the restroom. I remained at the table, trying to understand what I had walked into. That was when Daniel's father leaned toward me. "If you really are her husband," he said softly, "then you need to leave with her before she tells you the whole story." I stared at him. "Why?" He looked toward the hallway and lowered his voice. "Because Claire didn't come here to prove she moved on." He paused. "She came here to find something." I read the message twice, then slowly looked around the table. Daniel was watching me. Margaret was pretending to eat. His father stared at his plate. Nobody spoke. Then I noticed something else. The chair beside Daniel was empty, and underneath it sat a small black envelope with my name written across the front in Claire's own handwriting. Before I could ask what, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Claire. Only 5 words appeared on the screen: "Don't trust anyone at this table." I slipped the black envelope into my jacket before anyone noticed. When Claire returned, I stood and met her halfway. "We need to leave," I whispered. She looked at my face and immediately understood. "You found it?" I nodded. "What is this?" Her eyes moved toward Daniel's family. "Not here." We walked outside through the side entrance and stopped beside my truck. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, Claire took a deep breath. "Daniel's father owns the medical supply company where I work. 3 months ago, I discovered that someone had been changing invoices." I frowned. "Changing them how?" "Adding shipments that were never delivered. Thousands of dollars at a time." She looked down. "I reported it." "And they blamed you?" She shook her head. "Not immediately. Daniel defended me. He said he believed me." She paused. "Then I found out the altered invoices were being approved from his account." I stared at her. "You were engaged to him." "I know." Her voice cracked. "That's why I called off the wedding." She explained that Daniel insisted someone had stolen his password. But when Claire tried to report the matter again, her supervisor told her to stop asking questions. 2 days later, she received an anonymous message warning her that if she went to the police, she would be blamed for the missing money. "So why bring me tonight?" I asked. Claire looked embarrassed. "Because I needed access to the family dinner without anyone knowing I was investigating them." "And the husband story?" "Daniel's family knows I have no one. I thought if I arrived with a husband, they'd be too distracted to realize what I was looking for." I pulled the envelope from my jacket. "Then why is this here?" Claire stared at it. "I didn't put that there." My stomach tightened. We opened it together. Inside was a printed copy of a security log from Claire's workplace. One line had been circled in red. It showed someone entering the company records room at 11:48 p.m. The night before Claire discovered the altered invoices. The name beside the entry made Claire go completely still. "That's impossible," she whispered. "Who is it?" She handed me the page. It was Daniel's father. But the next page was worse. It showed that someone had used Claire's employee access card 15 minutes later. Claire looked at me. I never went there that night. I studied the document again. Something felt wrong. The timestamp was real, but the signature beside it wasn't Claire's. "Someone wants you to believe your card was used," I said. Claire stared at me. "Why?" Before I could answer, headlights appeared at the end of the parking lot. A black SUV rolled toward us and stopped. Daniel stepped out alone. He didn't look angry. He looked terrified. He walked straight toward Claire and said, "You need to hear this before my father finds out I told you." Then he looked at me and added, "Your husband's story wasn't the reason I let you into that dinner. I needed you there because I knew someone was going to expose the real thief tonight." Daniel reached into his jacket and pulled out a small flash drive. "My father thinks Claire stole the money," he said. "But I found out who actually did it." Claire stared at him. "Why didn't you tell me?" Daniel looked ashamed. "Because I was scared. My father controls the company, and the person responsible has been working with him for years." He handed me the drive. "Everything is on there." We returned to the restaurant, but this time Claire didn't walk beside Daniel. She stayed beside me. Inside the private dining room, everyone was waiting. Daniel's father stood at the head of the table. "Where have you two been?" he demanded. Daniel placed the flash drive on the table. "We know what happened." His father's face changed instantly. "You have no idea what you're talking about." Daniel connected the drive to the restaurant's laptop. A folder appeared containing invoices, emails, payment records, and security footage. The evidence showed that company funds had been diverted into an account controlled by the family's longtime accountant. But the accountant wasn't acting alone. Several emails showed Daniel's father had approved the transfers. Claire covered her mouth. She had spent months believing she had been framed by Daniel, when the truth was even closer to home. Daniel's father tried to grab the laptop, but Daniel stepped in front of him. "It's over." His father looked at Claire. "You have no idea what you've done." Claire calmly answered, "I didn't do anything. I only refused to stay quiet." That sentence silenced the room. Then I opened the black envelope again. There was one final page we had overlooked. It contained a handwritten statement from the accountant, admitting that he had used Claire's access card after Daniel's father instructed him to make her look responsible. The statement had been signed 2 days earlier. Daniel looked at his father. "You knew this would come out." His father said nothing. The police arrived 20 minutes later after Daniel had already sent copies of the evidence to an attorney and the company's board. Nobody shouted. Nobody fought. The truth simply sat on the table where the family had gathered for dinner. Months later, Claire and I were no longer pretending to be married. We became friends first, then something more. One evening, she returned the gold ring she had given me that night. "You kept it," she said. I smiled. "You told me to wear it." She shook her head. "I didn't think you'd actually keep it." I looked at the ring in my palm. "Neither did I." She laughed softly. Then she asked me the question I had secretly hoped she would ask. "If I asked you to be my husband for real someday, would you still say yes?" I looked at her for a long moment. "Only if you promise we won't need an excuse this time." She smiled, took my hand, and rested her head against my shoulder. For once, neither of us had to pretend.